out there and
Yeah.
graciously received. A little smile, a little
Good.
but
Baruch Hashem.
we'll see.
Today we're going to take a look at a pasuk, a verse or two in the 5th reading of Parshat Mishpatim. So the Torah talks about the sabbatical year, and then in chapter 23, verse 13, the Torah interjects with an exhortation about the Torah's commandments, the things we're supposed to do, and the prohibitions, the things Hashem does not want us to do. And ultimately, this is about seeing heaven and earth, as you will find out. Faithfulness and disillusionment, disloyalty, that we might chas v'shalom exhibit towards God. Verse 13, Uvechoil asher amarti aleh. So this is a roundup verse. Everything that I've told you up until now. Tishameru. You need to be very vigilant about this and watch carefully. V'shem elihim achedim leisaskiru. And the names of other gods should not be mentioned. Lo yishama al picha should not be heard on your lips. Let's take a look at Rashi to try to understand what is the meaning of Ubechoil asher amarti aleichem. And I've told you, tishameru, you should guard with vigilance. So Rashi says that this pasuk comes to add weight or severity, the notion of the positive mitzvahs of the Torah. That is to say, there are 248 areas of life through which we can achieve and nurture connection with God by our actions, by the things we do. And those are called the Ramach mitzvahs aseh, the 248 positive mitzvahs. Not all of them are mitzvahs that actually require an imperative of an action. Some of them are connection points, like the mitzvah we're learning about these days in Sefer HaMitzvahs, the 107th positive mitzvah of the Torah according to the Rambam, which is the mitzvah of ritual impurity engendered by a corpse. It's not a mitzvah, it's not an imperative, it's a connection point. When we govern ourselves in accordance with these rules, we become more profoundly connected to God. We reveal the innate bond that every one of us has with God. So Rashi says something very interesting. Verse 13 comes as kind of a follow-up on everything we've talked about. All the things, all these things I told you, tishameru, you should guard or watch. You need to exhibit vigilance. It says Rashi, la'asais kol mitzvahs asei ba'azhara, that you should do all the positive mitzvahs, and here's a warning added to them. In other words, that a person who doesn't do the positive mitzvahs, the person who doesn't follow what Hashem tells him to do, not only is he violating a positive commandment, but he's also violating a negative commandment. It's a sin of omission, not a sin of commission. So you didn't actually go against Hashem, but per se you did go against Hashem, because Hashem wanted this to be done, and by avoiding it, or ignoring it, or choosing not to do it, you're actually violating the notion of a negative mitzvah too. As Rashi puts it, shekol shmira, whenever you find the word shmira, and shmira means to guard or be vigilant, to ensure that it's protected. So whenever you find the word shmira in Torah, azharahi, this is a warning. And it's b'makayim lav. It comes instead of the terminology, don't do, the Torah will say, I'm warning you. Danger ahead. Don't proceed. So it's like a don't, like a no. From Rashi's perspective, this verse comes along to equate positive mitzvahs to negative mitzvahs. But we should take positive mitzvahs seriously. You know, the Alter Rebbe, in the beginning of Yigeres HaTshuva, he says that people think that a positive mitzvah, a sin of omission, is not such a big deal because you just do tshuva and that's it. Whereas a negative mitzvah, you have to do tshuva, you have to express regret, and you have to resolve for the future, and then Yom HaKippur comes and takes it along. So it's a positive mitzvah, that's it. You do tshuva and you're done. The Alter Rebbe says, do not learn leniency with regard to the positive mitzvahs, Because, as he puts it, ha'or nedar, the light, the energy is missing. And you actually can never make up for it. You only have so many days to live. So if in a particular day you didn't do the mitzvahs that are incumbent on you for that day, you never get another chance. It's not so, oh, I didn't daven today. No problem. I'll daven tomorrow. Obviously daven tomorrow. Is tomorrow. What about today? How do you make up for today? So it's not something that can be trifled. Technically, you can do tshuva easily, but this is a serious thing. The way the Sifsei Chachamim explains Rashi, the Sifsei Chachamim says we find a very interesting principle. Asei doche lo tasei. If you have a positive mitzvah to fulfill and you have a negative mitzvah to fulfill, the positive overrides the negative. And what's a prime example of this in the Gemara? That it's prohibited to marry one's brother's wife. However, if a man dies without children, then it's a mitzvah for the brother to marry their wife. That's called yibum, or a levirate marriage. So 1 second, the Torah prohibits this union. How could the Torah allow it? How could the Torah say it's okay? And the answer is, asei doche lo tasei. A positive mitzvah overrides a negative mitzvah. You're not allowed to have wool and linen together. But if you have linen tzitzis, so it's a linen garment, and linen threads, but the tchelet, the special turquoise thread that has to be wrapped around the white, which we don't have that today's day and age. But it has to be of wool. So what do you do if you have linen tzitzis? Asei doche lo tasei. A positive mitzvah overrides a negative mitzvah. So why is that? Why is a positive mitzvah better than a negative mitzvah? This is something Hashem wants you to do. This is something Hashem doesn't want you to do. Why don't we say it's a mitzvah haba ba'avera? It's a good thing, but it comes through something negative. So you shouldn't do it.
It's Hashem's will, obviously.
It's Hashem's will that you shouldn't violate His mitzvahs. So, but how
If He specifically ordains
So
that
it's
you can do something.
50-50. Here Hashem says don't do it. Here Hashem says do it. How do you know that the do is better than the don't? So the Sifsei Chachamim says the answer is in this pasuk. He said based on this Rashi, he says because a negative mitzvah is only a negative mitzvah, but a positive mitzvah is a positive and ultimately also a negative. Very interesting concept. In other words, besides the fact that there are 248 positive mitzvahs, all the positive mitzvahs bear with them the weight of negative mitzvahs too. And that makes a positive mitzvah more powerful than a negative mitzvah.
And so why is it that you said if you violate a positive mitzvah, you can just say tshuva and you're exonerated at that moment?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So why could you? The answer is because tshuva doesn't help really. The tshuva that could help is 1, 2, 3. But there's an element of what's the tshuva going to help? The light is missing. When you have a negative mitzvah, you've absorbed negativity, dark energy, toxins. So the tshuva cleanses you. But here, the tshuva can do something, but it can't make up what was lost. Unless we have what's called cheliater, to serve Hashem with greater fervor, and there's much to be discussed about that. But on the surface, missing a positive mitzvah is not a little thing. It's a big deal. And here we see, very interestingly, in the equation of positive and negative mitzvahs, that the negative mitzvah actually attaches itself, the weight of a negative mitzvah, to every positive mitzvah too. This is not so widely known. People don't realize that the positive mitzvahs are also negative mitzvahs. So what happens if you have 2 negatives and a positive mitzvah? Then actually it doesn't overweigh it. For example, it's a mitzvah to destroy the chametz on Pesach. An actual mitzvah. Our destroying of chametz takes place before the actual mitzvah begins. The actual mitzvah begins in the afternoon. Once we've crossed over into the second half of the day. But we get rid of our chametz before. Why? Because we're afraid to play games. We don't want to wait around. If the day passes and we didn't do the mitzvah, then we're in trouble. So the Minchas Chinuch says you should leave over a kazayis of chametz, wait till after, and then burn it, because then you have the mitzvah b'kum v'aseh. Then you actually fulfill the mitzvah. Nobody does it. Why? Because it's too risky. So by the time the afternoon of Pesach comes along, our chametz is already gone. So what happens if you find chametz on Pesach? On Pesach, find chametz. What should you do? Burn it, right? What if it's Yom
Already
Tov?
allotted for it?
Huh?
The bracha before.
You made a bracha before, you wanted to do whatever you did.
Chametz you haven't found, and you
You ended up with chametz.
disavow from it.
Let's not belabor that point. We're still before Purim, but you ended up with chametz.
Okay.
Can you burn it on Pesach? So if it's Chol HaMoed, you have to burn it. If it's Yom Tov, you're not allowed to burn it. Why not? It's a positive mitzvah. Tashbisu sa'ir mebatechem. You got to get rid of the chametz. And on Yom Tov, we use fire. The kitchen is open. So if we're using fire, why can't we destroy the chametz? What's the answer? Because Yom Tov is a positive mitzvah and a negative mitzvah. As Shabbat is a positive and a negative. And because it's an asay and a lo tasay, and because getting rid of the chametz is only an asay, so therefore ein asay docha asay v'lo tasay. The positive can override a negative because it has the weight of a negative two, but it's not actually a negative mitzvah. It's still one mitzvah. Whereas Yom Tov is actually two mitzvahs, a positive and a negative. So a positive can't override a positive and a negative, but a positive can override a negative alone. And the Sifsei Chacham says, based on this Rashi, that's the logic behind it.
How is it a positive and a negative?
How is Yom Tov a positive and negative? It's a positive mitzvah to keep Yom Tov, and it's a negative mitzvah to violate Yom Tov. Now, after giving us this emphasis on vigilance for positive mitzvahs, and tells us, Lo yisaskiru, that the name of other gods should not pass your lips. What does this mean? It means quite literally that you should not say the name of an idol. If people worship an idol, that's sad. Who are we to condemn them? But we still can't say the name of the idol. So for example, and I mean no offense to anybody, there's a cult that worships idols. Some of them live right here in Toronto, and we call them the Harry Kishka. Why? Because you're not allowed to say the name. It's the name of an idol. They worship an idol. We can't say the name of an idol. Kishka is not an idol. Kishka is just good food. It sounds like it. So lo yisaskiru means...
Just out of curiosity,
yeah.
if you, as an expression, make reference to JC.
You're not allowed to, my dear friend.
Yeah?
No. It's the name of the idolatrous names are not allowed to be mentioned. First names of a person are
Is
not
that
a problem.
considered an idol?
First names, the Rambam says yes. First names of an idol are not a problem. The first name is a person. The second name attributes the divinity. And we reject that entirely. With the greatest of respect.
Say the first name is okay, but not the second
That's
name?
correct.
Interesting.
Yeah. Lo yisaskiru. So what does it mean? Rashi says it means more than just don't mention the name. Shalayimru loi shemor li b'tzad avodah zarah pleinis. Do me a favor. I left something right next to that particular statue or idol. Guard it next to that idol. In other words, you're using the idol as a reference point. You're using it. You're not allowed to do that. Or, Tamedimi b'yom laved zara. Wait for me at the idol. When I was living in Israel, Fagi and I once went somewhere for Shabbos. I think we went to the Tanya. So we found this hasa'ah, this ride that picks you up, and the guy said, wait where the first bombing was. What the heck do I know? I didn't live in Israel at the time. I don't know what. It's a binyonei Oma, it's a shah p'tzatza. So anyway, I asked somebody, where was the p'tzatza? He said, over here. So I'm waiting there, and the guy couldn't find us. This is before the days of cell phones. And then he came on, boy, he's screaming at us, I'm late for Shabbos, and I told you to wait by the bombing. I'm like, I'm sorry, there was a different bombing. He says, the p'tzatza rishona, you know about the p'tzatza shniya. The first bombing, second bombing. People use events to characterize a place. Right? So if somebody will come along and say, wait for me where the idol is, or where they worship the idol, you're not allowed to do that. Why? Because the idol has become prominent in your life. You're using it as a place for you to go to.
Can you say wait for me near the church?
I'm going to repeat this again. You cannot use idolatry, which is the worship of something other than God, as a location, as a pinpoint area. Can't type it into Waze. Can't type in the address of an idolatrous place, even if the place you're going is the flea market, doesn't have an address. Davar acher, another way of understanding this. Uvechol asher amarti aleichem tishomeru, v'shem elihim achelim leisaskiru. Another way of understanding this whole verse, not by making it two separate things, but rather to bring it all together. If you want to keep my mitzvahs, if you want to be vigilant about mitzvahs, so then don't mention the names of other gods. That's not okay. If you want to be vigilant about all my mitzvahs, don't mention any other gods. L'lamedcha, that teaches you, sheshkula avodah zara keneged kol ha-mitzvahs kulan. That violating the principles of idolatry, ascribing divinity or omnipotence to anything other than God, is essentially a violation of the entire Torah. It's as if you left the building of Judaism altogether. V'hanizarba, and a person who avoids attributing divinity to things that are not God, kishomer es kulam, it's as if he keeps all the mitzvahs. So this business of idolatry is a big deal. It's really important. God says, I want your attention and your attention only, and don't share it. It's like a marriage. It's an absolute thing. This is a unique relationship that exists between spouses that is not supposed to go beyond that. And if it does, it's a violation of the very essence of the marriage. It's not a detail. It violates the foundation, everything. Lo yishama, so why does the Torah use the expression lo yishama? It shouldn't be heard. Says Rashi, afilu min hagoy, even if it's coming from the mouth of a non-Jew. Says, well, that's not my problem, he's not Jewish. I understand a fellow Jew have spiritual responsibility towards, of arvos, we're in the same boat, but it's not Jewish. So no. Nobody's supposed to worship idols. It's not good when people worship idols. And therefore, you shouldn't cause anybody to say this. Al picha would then mean, Rashi says, by your hand, not by your mouth, because it's not what you're saying, what somebody else is saying. That don't make a business partnership with somebody who's prone to that kind of idolatry, because what will happen if you get into a business dispute? You're going to be in a court position, and what's he going to swear on? He's going to swear on what's holy to him, what's sacred to him. He's going to swear the name of his idol. So you're causing him to swear in this fashion. So then it comes out, you're causing that you're causing the name of an idol to be mentioned. This is a Gemara in Sanhedrin on Daf Tzadi Gimel talks about this.
When you self-limits, is that a partnership or not? To a non-Jew?
No, it's not. A partnership is when people get into, the common pursuit, but then it's possible for there to be disputes. So we live in a secular society today. It's not an issue. But once upon a time, the courts and the faith system that people worship are one and the same. And that it becomes immediately an issue.
So are Christians idolaters going through an intercessor?
It depends what level. There are different faith systems or different denominations within certain faith systems. Some of them are idolatry and some of them are not.
But do they not approach your skill?
So I'm not. First of all, it's not a discussion about a specific faith system now, but there are certain denominations of faith systems that are idolatrous and some that aren't. As long as there's Elikad Elikaya, means the God of all gods, and you think it's an intermediary, but don't attribute and ascribe divinity and actual individual omnipotence, it's forbidden for a Jew, but not forbidden for a non-Jew. If, however, the worship becomes onto the intermediary itself, you're worshiping the intermediary, you're not worshiping God anymore, then for sure it's idolatry even for a non-Jew. But this is a very complex question. For a Jew, for sure it's wrong. For a Jew, if it's idolatry. And else Hashem has higher expectations of us. For us, for sure it's wrong. What is this whole business of idolatry followed with? Yom Tov. Pasuk Dalet. Shalosh Hagam Tachigli. I want you to come and celebrate with me 3 times, God says, Bashana. Rashi says, Regala means Palmin, times. V'chein, we see also with regard to a man named Bilam, a master idolater. He beat the living daylights out of his donkey. It says, Kihiki Sani Zeh Shalosh Hagalim. That donkey spoke once in his life, and he got quoted in Rashi. Look at that. The donkey said, you whipped me 3 times. What'd you beat me 3 times for? So Regala means times. And then immediately what we go into, Eschag HaMatzes Tishmer. Make sure you keep my Yom Tov, which is called Pesach, the festival of matzahs. Shivas Yomim Techol Matzahs. For 7 days you eat matzah. Ka'asher tzivisicha as I have commanded you. And this, of course, already showed up earlier in Parshat Bo when we were just leaving Mitzrayim. L'mayed Chedesh Aviv. Make sure it's the time of the spring month. B'yatzasam in Mitzrayim. That's when you left Egypt. V'layira'o panai reikam. Don't show up empty-handed. When you come to the Beis HaMikdash, you must come also with a gift. You have to come with a korban, with an offering. So clearly, we have this major emphasis on the idea of worshiping God, of being mindful of heaven at all times, faithfulness, contrasted by disloyalty, the disillusionment of idolatry, and then we kind of go into Yom Tov. What's the connection? This verse is like an island. Verse 13 like is oscillating between a discussion of the sabbatical year and then a subsequent discussion of Yom Tov. How does one lead to the next? What's the bridge?
Isn't that the point, though? You said a positive mitzvah to Tishmor, so here's a positive mitzvah.
Okay, so do we choose any positive mitzvah? I gave you an example of Yom Tov. I happen to have given you an example, but
Hashem has to say something, so...
that's not a good enough answer. Hashem has to say something is not good enough. The Torah isn't, well, we had to say something, so, that's what we're doing now. So come take a look on page Kuf Nun.
Fortunately, we have the Rebbe to elucidate.
Right. Fortunately, the Rebbe is going to illuminate this, but actually, first, the Rebbe is going to introduce us to a Baal HaTurim, who elucidated and illuminated the pathway for us. But the Rebbe is going to explain the Baal HaTurim in a way that really resonates. So the Baal HaTurim answers this question. It's in the bold print on top. It says, Samach Pesach Laveda Zara. The celebration or observance of Passover, of Pesach, is juxtaposed to the notion of idolatry, the prohibition of idolatry. Loimar to say, Ma Aveda Zara Asura Bahano. Just as idolatry is something we're not allowed to benefit from, you actually can't benefit from it. You can do business, you can benefit from things that are not kosher. You can't do business or benefit from idolatry. How much idolatry is prohibited? Can I do a little bit? So technically, a little bit of pork is not an outright violation of Torah, at least not a full violation of Torah, not one that would necessarily involve culpability. There's a machlekes between Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish. If a chatzi shir, if a modicum or a half an amount is prohibited biblically or only rabbinically, but it's not a full violation. So if somebody is not well on Yom Kippur, what we tell him to do? Eat a chatzi shir. Eat half the amount. Don't eat the whole amount. Don't fully violate. So avodah zarah is prohibited, absolutely. Even the smallest amount. There's no amount of avodah zarah that's okay. There's no shir. And guess what? Av chametz b'Pesach. So is true also with leaven on Pesach. Asur b'hana. It's prohibited to benefit in any way, shape, or form. V'oiser b'chosher. What are you having a difficulty with the book over there?
You didn't say the page.
Kuf Nun, I did say.
Good?
Page Kuf Nun.
Ah, okay, now I know.
I wish they would have made English or regular numbers over here. It would be easier for
That's
everybody.
fine, it's just I didn't
Kuf is 100 and Nun is 50. Kuf Nun. So just like avodah zarah is prohibited even in the smallest amount, so too chametz is prohibited in the smallest amount. So the Baal HaTurim says that's why it's a natural bridge between idolatry and between Pesach. All right, you're saying like, all right, Baal HaTurim, fine. I mean, I hear there's some kind of connection in the technicality of avodah zarah on some technical level, but really that's how idolatry leads me into Pesach. The avoidance of attributing divinity to a foreign entity, that leads me into avoiding chametz. So the Rebbe says, this is the dimyan, this is the real connection between the two. Yeduim divrei Haran. There's famous words of Rabbeinu Nissen, one of the great Rishonim, in his commentary in the beginning of Masechet Pesachim. Rabbeinu Nissen discusses the notion that even the smallest amount of chametz is aser. And he says, Hasiba lakach. The reason that the Torah was so stringent when it came to the prohibition of chametz, why is it worse than pork? Why is it even worse than milk and meat, which you're not allowed to benefit from either? But there's not kol machmetzes. It's not the tiniest amount. The asra, we prohibited afes etzem himotzei b'bayis. You're not allowed to own chametz. If you so much as own chametz, you violate the Torah. If you own a cheeseburger, you didn't violate anything. Now, if you eat the cheeseburger, this is a problem. If you sell the cheeseburger, it's a problem. If you own it, all right, you own it. Ownership in and of itself, possession in and of itself is not illegal. When it comes to chametz, however, even possession is illegal. And why is this? Says the Ran, simple. Because we're comfortable with it. Comfortable. An observant Jew is not comfortable with a cheeseburger. It makes his skin crawl. It makes him uncomfortable. It's food he never ate in his life. It's food he never cooked in his life. there's a certain distance. In the language of the Ran, it says bedili minei. A Jew is observant and stays away from it. He sees a lobster, it makes him uncomfortable. But he sees chametz. What's wrong with chametz? Only a day ago he was eating chametz with great gusto. And now they came along and said, don't you dare touch it. Don't even own it. I was eating it yesterday. Here we are, next year, Pesach is Erev Shabbos. Friday night we'll sit and eat challah. You have to eat challah. It's not an option. You're not allowed to eat matzah. You'll sit and eat challah, and the next day we'll tell you, stop, no chametz. So last night I was eating it. Yeah, that was last night. Now it's Erev Pesach. It's a paradigm shift. And we're never eating chametz again? Oh, don't worry. In 8 days you eat chametz again. So precisely because it's something we're so comfortable with, it's so easy to cross the line, there's so little demarcation between us and chametz, so little daylight between us and chametz. So therefore, kaim chashash gadol yeser. There's a much greater concern sheyishkach es ha'isur, that we simply will be mindfulness. There will be a lack of mindfulness, forgetfulness, and we'll reach for chametz, forgetting that it's Pesach and it's prohibited. The Rebbe says the same thing is about avodah zarah. Same thing about avodah zarah. What are you talking about? A Jew avoids it like the plague. The Rebbe says, don't be so sure. Yadua, it's very well known, shahamunach avodah zarah, that the notion idolatry does not mean that you necessarily worship a foreign deity, a mountain, tree, or a statue. It means attributing some kind of independence to anything in the world other than God. If a Jew says, I can't make a living without stealing, that's idolatry. Because God is the one who gives you parnasa. And if you think that parnasa comes from anywhere else, that's an act of idolatry. If a Jew says, I can't keep Shabbos, well, I can't keep Shabbos because I got to make a living. But God says He gives you a living. Yeah, I know, but let's get real. Practically speaking, I have to go to work. So if you say practically speaking, that's idolatry. That means you believe that there are forces other than God that are providing for your living. That's also idolatry. And therefore, this is something that we cross over a line we cross on a daily basis. In fact, the Alter Rebbe comes along and he says, if you get angry at something somebody did to you, that's also idolatry. Are you saying that that person is beyond the control of God? If it happened, it was a geshikacha pratis. It was meant to be. So in other words, to live with faithfulness means to live with real mindfulness knows you see heaven on earth. Whatever is happening, I see the hand of Hashem. Heaven and earth are not two disparate realities.
Rabbi, so you're saying somebody goes to work on Shabbos, you're going to accuse them of avodah zarah? Because they have to make a living?
In a mild form, absolutely.
Really?
Yes.
Really? So they didn't violate Shabbos, they also violated the...
It's not a technical violation of avodah zarah, but it's ki'ilu. It's, if you think about it, it ultimately adds up to the same. What does it mean when the Gemara says, Kol hakoes ki'ilu oved avodah zarah? Anybody who gets angry, it's as if you worship an idol. What does that mean?
It's a metaphor.
You know,
you're not going to say,
I bumped into...
You're not literally worshiping an idol.
No, also not literal. It's not literal. You're right, it's not literal.
And nobody would think that
It's
because you're
worshipping yourself and worshipping money and worshipping fame and worshipping fortune. Yeah.
Taking Hashem out of the process.
Why does it say kol hakoyes? You get angry, it's kilo avodah zarah. It's as if you worshipped an idol. Obviously, it's not mamish, but it's as if there's a commonality. There's a common theme weaving its way through. You believe in God or you don't believe in God. God is in control or God's in control sometimes. When I let Him be. When he really wants to be, but He's not always in control. Sometimes He's checked out. then heaven's not on earth.
There's that moment when something happens when you flash.
Yeah, there's the moment you flash.
A moment later, oh my gosh, what have I done?
Right. So this is this is very difficult.
All day long.
It happens all day long. That's the point. It happens all day long. It's just like chametz. We're so comfortable with it. That's exactly the point. It happens all day long. That's exactly what the Rebbe says.
How come ownership of an avodah zarah, as long as you don't consume it, is acceptable?
Who said it's acceptable?
You said ownership is okay.
No, not of avodah zarah. Chametz and avodah zarah. A cheeseburger is not an avodah zarah. Nobody worships cheeseburgers; they eat them. I mean, I shouldn't say nobody. People worship kishka. They may worship cheeseburgers also. I don't know.
And then also, why is 1/60th of milk in meat acceptable when you say chometz is absolutely unacceptable in any which way.
Right. So that's a perfect example where chametz, the slightest amount, we say is unacceptable, whereas other contraband is because chametz is much more stringent. This is a discussion why actually a mashu of chametz is usher, whether it's biblical or rabbinic. That's a discussion that's beyond the purview of this morning's class. But the point we're making here is that avodah zarah is something that ultimately we're too comfortable with. If we think for a moment God's not in control, like for example attributing our business success to our own smarts, to our own capabilities, to our own hard work instead of the bracha from Hashem, that is a form of idolatry. So you're right, we do this all the time. You're right. We flash in a moment, and it's exactly why the Torah comes along and says you better be very careful of avodah zarah. I once heard this said in the name of the Tzemach Tzedek that something happened, and he was becoming very upset, and he said, "Quick, bring me a Shulchan Aruch kol hakoyas kilo avodah zarah." When you get angry, it's like I have to look in Shulchan Aruch to see if I'm allowed to be angry.
Is there anything we can attribute to ourselves?
Is there anything you can attribute to yourself? The mitzvahs you do, the faithfulness you choose to have. That's something that you choose. Avodas Hashem, Hakol b'dei Shamayim, everything's in heaven's hands, with the exception of Yirah Shamayim, your sense of reverence. So my dear friends, the point is, heaven must be on earth. And disloyalty is not acceptable. And ultimately it leads to disillusionment. Because as we said in the beginning, Avodah Zarah is equal to all the mitzvahs of the Torah.